Our speaker this afternoon is Jackie Hallock, who we're very honored to have with us today. And I'm going to turn it right over to Jackie so she can share some words.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you, Chris. That was amazing. Can we give him another round of applause? That was really beautiful. And this is just, I also want to thank the weather because this is a beautiful day. Last year it poured, so we're all very lucky that it's a nice day today. And thanks to the foundation of CVPH for inviting me here and for all the good work that they do to steward this circle of healing and hope. This special place gives grieving families a location to honor their loved ones and a peaceful spot to remember them. If you're sitting here today, you're likely waiting to hear your loved one's name read and you're suffering a great loss. I just want to tell you how very sorry I am and how much I understand going through the process of grief. I also want to assure you that your loved ones are in very good company here. And that's not just because they're hanging out with my son's paver, although I don't think you could ask for better company than Tristan. Circles of Healing and Hope, or what are often known as Angels of Hope, are based on the New York Times best-selling novel, The Christmas Box, which is the story of a mother's grief over the loss of her child and the hope she finds at the base of an angel statue. This story resonated with parents, and soon communities all over the country were erecting angel statues, very similar to the ones you see at the center of our circle. About 15 years ago, a group of community leaders in Plattsburgh felt that we needed our own Angel of Hope, and thus the Circle of Healing and Hope was born. There are even a few people here today who were part of that effort, including Carrie Haley. Where'd she go? There, she was part of it. Dina McCullough, Bob Parks, Bob Pooler, and Craig Van Bargen. Now, while most Angels of Hope are strictly for children, the team spearheading our circle at CVPH made a conscious decision to be more inclusive to everyone grieving a loss, no matter what age the person was when they died. And let's be honest, it's good that our circle includes adults because all these children probably need some babysitters. Plus, if we really think about it, every one of the people memorialized was someone's child. Grief hits or will hit every single one of us in profound ways, and the way you handle your grief will look very different from the person sitting next to you. Losing someone you love is gut-wrenching, it's physically painful, and many times hard to endure, no matter who that person was to you. You may be honoring today a beloved work friend with a paver because she was the one person who made you smile every time you came to work, and now you feel lost without having her there. Or you could be honoring your husband or wife, the one person who knew you better than anyone else, and now you have to hold back the tears every time you crawl into bed without that person there. Or maybe it's your teenager who lost the battle to cancer, and you're remembering the countless hours you spent with them on the road, driving them to Burlington and to Boston Children's Hospital for treatments, and you got them a paver because they should be graduating from college this year? Or is this paver the embodiment of everything you've lost with their death, the chance to raise a child and be a mother, and experience all the milestones that come with having a son? When your child dies, you deal with the grief of losing a perfect baby, but you also grieve the life you would have had as parents. We'll never know what it's like to give our baby a bath, read him a bedtime story, and then tuck him into bed. When Tristan died, we lost all the hopes and dreams we had for him, along with the dreams we had for our own lives. For Tom and me, my husband, having a stone to memorialize Tristan here in Plattsburgh turned out to be a great source of comfort for us. We buried our son in a cemetery about 4 hours south in the Catskills in the small town of Gilboa, where Tom is from and where his dad, mom, brother, and well, many Hallocks are buried, and where he and I will eventually be buried. But Plattsburgh would have been the town where he would have grown up, made friends, gone to school, probably visited the CVPH emergency room a few times. So it was very important to us to have something here to remember him. It's also been a place we visit on his birthday and at other times, just to think about him and enjoy this peaceful spot. I can only speak of my own experience of how carving my son's name into a granite paver here has brought me comfort. By doing this, I am telling the world, or at least the people here, that he mattered. His life mattered, and I want you to know that. Sometimes a marker like those here, or a gravestone, is all a parent has to express their grief. I want to share a story with you. 15 years ago, Tom's cousin and her husband had a son who was their only child and the light of their lives. One night when he was 13, he climbed into bed with his parents, telling them that he wasn't feeling well. Thinking nothing of it, they snuggled with him. But then he went into cardiac arrest. By the time the ambulance arrived, Gilboa is in farm country, an hour away was the nearest rescue squad. He had died of an undiagnosed heart condition. He was buried in the same small cemetery where Tristan now is, and for a few years, there wasn't anything to mark his grave. Then one day, 3 of the largest pieces of blocky granite arrived and were placed on top of where he was buried. These were 20 times larger than any of the traditional headstones and really stuck out because they didn't look anything like what you'd normally see in a cemetery. Of course, no one ever said anything. But when we buried Tristan a few plots away, several of my family members came up to me and asked what the deal was with those enormous pieces of stone. I hadn't understood it at the time it was erected, but after losing my own child, I told them that what they were looking at was the embodiment of a parent's grief. It's also important that we talk with each other about the people we've lost. I know it can be hard to bring up a deceased child with their parents, but I'm always thrilled when someone wants to talk with me about Tristan. And every mom of loss I've ever spoken to feels the same way. We want to keep those memories alive. Last year, on the anniversary of 9/11, 60 Minutes did a story where they interviewed members from the New York City Fire Department who survived the World Trade Center attacks and who worked alongside those who died. The part of the piece that has stuck with me was when one of the firefighters said that in African American culture, one of the ways they honor their dead is to simply speak their name. I'd like to think that each of us has just spoken our loved one's name for many years to come by honoring their memory with a paver here. So we know it's meaningful to memorialize our loved ones. But what does that have to do with hope? I once had a coworker tell me that I should never use the word hope at my job. Before then, I never thought of it as a bad word. Well, thankfully, that coworker is long gone. I would argue that having hope for our future, even if it's just the smallest sliver, is sometimes all we have to put one foot in front of the other after a devastating loss. I know how it feels to be without hope, and I'm sure many of you have felt this way too. Tom and I tried to get pregnant for 10 years, and after trying just about everything to make it happen, we did our best to make peace with not being able to conceive a child, but it was a very hopeless feeling. And then, about 6 months later, during a particularly stressful time in our lives, I was shocked to discover I was pregnant. After a series of blood tests and ultrasounds, our son was determined to be healthy and growing perfectly. We went from that low point to what would become the happiest time in our lives. I think back on those blissful weeks of imagining our lives with a little boy. Of course, it all came crashing down at 21 weeks into my pregnancy when we discovered that he had a genetic condition that would be fatal. The irony and cruelty of our situation was soul-crushing. I carried him to term, and after I gave birth, we gave Tristan as much love as we could, not knowing the minute, the hour, or day of his death, just that it would soon be here. We ended up having 3 wonderful days with him. After he died, something happened that we weren't expecting. People started asking us where they could make a donation in Tristan's memory, and in our grief, we thought about how much we enjoyed reading to him in the hospital. I knew that the Giving Library at Mountain Lake PBS operated on a shoestring budget, that's being generous, so I thought a few $100s could go a long way for them. Well, if you don't know what happened next, the donations to the library started coming in so fast and furious that we set up a fund called the Tristan Fund, and to date, we've raised more than $50,000. Free books are now given out to children across the North Country, in addition to providing books to parents with children in palliative care and in the NICU at UVM Medical Center. We also received notes of encouragement and hope with many of these donations, some from complete strangers. After the dust settled, what I realized is this community was telling us to have hope. You see examples of this every day across the North Country, whether it's last weekend's procession of classic cars following a funeral for a young father, to a mural going up in the city that will remind junior high students that they matter. These small gestures are your neighbors, friends, and complete strangers telling you that you should have hope for the future, even if that future is missing a very important person. I love the quote from Anne Frank, the foundation included on the postcard that was sent out announcing the ceremony. Who decided on that quote? Michelle? Of course it was Michelle. For those of you who didn't get the postcard, it said, "Where there's hope, there's life. It fills us with fresh courage and makes us strong again." I love that she said that. Of course, you could argue that Anne Frank was a young girl and naive to the true danger that lay ahead of her. But perhaps we need to be reminded by young people who haven't had that hope knocked out of them by the trials that adulthood often brings, that we should always remain hopeful, even in the worst of circumstances. Of course, the young are not the only people we can look to for inspiration to remain hopeful. I'd like to share something another 20th century person wrote about hope, someone I greatly admire, Mr. Freddie Mercury from the rock band Queen. At the end of his life, when he was all of 45, Freddie knew that he was dying of AIDS, and instead of wallowing in self-pity, he wrote some of Queen's most beautiful songs. In the lyrics, he reflects on the beauty of the world and finds hope despite knowing that his life would soon be over. He writes, "So quiet and peaceful, tranquil and blissful, there's a kind of magic in the air. What a truly magnificent view, a breathtaking scene with the dreams of the world in the palm of your hand, and the dream of the child is the hope of the man." My prayer for you today is that the memorial you've added to this circle will bring you peace and that you always have hope for the future. Thank you.
It's all right, Jackie, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your words, your inspiration, the beautiful quotes you found. Thank you so much. You've touched so many bases.